David came to himself and humbly bowed down and said, surrender. Saul's reaction to that was a complete perspective shift on David. Instead of wanting to hunt and kill David, he came to a realization that you will be king. Something within Saul broke at that moment. David later on went to be king. And I'm going to read a little bit of 1 Samuel 22. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there, and all those who were in distress and in debt and discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. From there, David went to Masav in Moab and said to the king of Moab, "Would you let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me?" David did not choose to lay down and die. He chose to stand up and fight. The thing is, he didn't stand up to fight Saul. He stood up and fight for his mission of what God intended him to be as a king. David found humility in that moment. Then we also have these other characters. Like, I feel like whenever I talk about my story, a lot of people compare me to Joseph and Job. You know, I'm sure you guys are familiar with those stories. But one thing that Joseph and Job both have together is that Joseph and Job were dealt really crappy cards in their life. Incredibly crappy cards. But how they reacted and played them was something really special, because it's an example for us today when we go through storms and when we go through wildernesses and when we go through adversity. Sometimes we can't find the answers. I couldn't find the answer of why this was happening to me while I was going through prison, why I had to wake up every day. I was seeking it for so long. I had this intention of, why is this happening to me, God? Until the moment God gave me the discernment to realize, God, Greg, you need to stop asking why, and you need to start asking what I'm trying to show you. The moment we have that perspective of, God, what are you trying to show me in this situation? Things start to change for you in your life. You stop being a victim to this world, because this world's not perfect. I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in the drama. Both were innocent and blameless. Both were bet on by God. Both tested for a greater purpose. Both leaned into what God was trying to show them instead of why this was happening to them. Both led a life of obedience, perseverance, and forgiveness. Both received more than just materialistic rewards or weathering the storm. I want to talk about the story of Job. See, the story of Job revolves around 3 major books. The story of Job is all about wisdom. I feel like that's what Job received the most at the end of his story. Of course, you guys are familiar with it, right? Job was bet on by God after Satan said, you know what? There's nobody righteous anymore in this world. He says, have you considered my servant Job? He's blameless. He's obedient. He's got so much. Well, he's like, oh, no, he's got so much because he's obedient because he's got so much. So God said, okay, I'm going to give you the authority to take everything from him. And I'm going to show you who Job is. And everything was taken from him, of course. And Job went through just such a nightmare of his whole family being killed and everything from him just stripped away. When you talk about the 3 books of wisdom, you have Proverbs. In Proverbs, it talks about how God is wise and just. Okay? If you read the Proverbs, you get so much fulfillment. You get so much encouragement that God is a just God and God is a wise God. And he's going to do what's right in your life. And then that book is actually challenged by Ecclesiastes, where Ecclesiastes kind of put the brakes on. He says, wait a second, hold on. Maybe this world is a little bit more unpredictable, and maybe it has a little bit more complexities. Right? Maybe it's not all about face value of good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. Sometimes maybe bad things can happen to good people. So Ecclesiastes challenged that. And then, of course, you have the book of Job, which is the application of both of those books. You have that through in a story of Job. And like I said, Job was upright. He got everything stripped from him. And at the end of all of this, Job came to the end of himself in the middle of a storm. And he challenged God. He demanded God for an explanation of why this was happening to him. God came to him and spoke to him and actually took Job on a little bit of a ride. He showed him the world. He showed him how complex it is. He showed him how much he has to juggle in making decisions, and how beautiful everything is. I think Job, after all of that, was humbled. He was humbled. A lot of people say Job was rewarded double for all the things he was lost, but actually, I don't think he was rewarded. I think that was a gift from God, because Job never deserved any of that, of what happened to him. As I look back on my life and how I move forward in my life, I remember this old letter I wrote to my wife, my now wife. At the time, it's so crazy because we used to play these like games. We used to write each other letters, and I didn't know how much of a poet I became reading Psalms and Proverbs almost every day of my life. And I look back on these. I look back on my letters, and I'm writing my memoir right now. I look back on my letters. I could not believe I wrote some of these things. You ever got to that point where you look back on your journals and you're like, man, I cannot believe I wrote something like that? And I want to read one of the letters to you guys. I wrote this to my wife, and this was me in the thick of being touched by God. I told her, during the summertime here in prison is a hot time of year. One of the greatest ways to mentally leave this place is to take notice of God's beautiful creation. Even though every inmate never finds time to stop sweating in this place, God's beauty still remains every day during the spring and summer. As I come back from work and I would take the long walk from the factory to the building, our coworkers and I would always pass this beautiful garden that sits right outside the landscaping shop. The garden was full of lilies, tulips, roses, and other captivating flowers. In the midst of this place, and I did not belong, I always found victory in imagining that I was picking a beautiful flower and handing it to you. I see you as this flower. Even though the flower is a pleasing image to look at, it has great purpose. The flower is giving, it supplies the bees with nectar, and the flower is enduring as it takes the beatings of the hot sun. And the flower is always expecting, coming in the summer and leaving in the winter. It never changes. It stays steadfast. God does not just create things to be pleasing to our eye or even to be put into use, but also to prove his existence. It starts with having eyes to see and ears to hear. I allowed God to remove a veil that was covering my eyes for so many years. I now see how amazing Jesus Christ is. I, Greg Kelly, along with the whole world, was a creation in his image. So now I leave you with a question. If God creates something as beautiful as the sky, animals, and flowers, how much beautiful are you, my future wife, Gabriel? Greg Kelly. God's promises and faithfulness in my life came true on November 6th, after 6 years of fighting. November 6th, 2019, I was up in New York City, just supporting my wife during a dance scholarship she was having on Broadway up there. And I had been waiting for 2.5 years after I was released in 2017 on an appeal bond for evidence of innocence. I was waiting for the CCA, the highest criminal court of Texas, to either do 3 things for me. Send me back to prison, exonerate me, or retry me. November 6th came around, and after 80-something weeks of waiting, hearing no news, I get the news with a camera in my face, my documentary camera, and it says relief granted of all charges and all claims. I'm exonerated. My life is restored. My life becomes a full circle, and I get a scholarship to play football up at Eastern Michigan University for 1 year. I'm little older guys, it's harder to go and compete with these 19-year-olds. And, I don't wake up like a spring chicken anymore. I actually told Steve I did. I came in I flew in last night. Steve, God bless his heart, he came and picked me up at 2 a.m. at the airport. My flight was super delayed. But I'm full of energy today. And I also was given a new purpose and identity. When I'm 28 years old, 27, 28 years old, and I have different goals and I have different identities than just being a football player now. When I was in prison, I learned how to woodwork. I learned how to weld a little bit. I learned how to use my hands. I did everything I possibly could. And my intention at the time was just to get out of my cell. I went to chapel class. I read the Word. I studied the Word. I was being discipled by by a small circle of friends I decided to create in there. But little did I know, God was doing something greater amongst it all. He was preparing me for the life later on that I'm going to live. Because now with my vocational skills that I learned in prison, I've created a woodworking business that manufactures and sells axe throwing targets. I have a rental trailer, of course, that we service all of Central Texas, but I'm the #1 axe throwing target seller in the nation. And thank you guys. I have a new identity in life. My wife and I, we want to have kids in a couple of years. We're enjoying marriage with each other because we've been away from each other for so long. We got together in middle school. 8th grade, we're middle school sweethearts. She stuck by my side through it all. It's a testament to her parents and how faithful they were in raising such a strong, independent woman who fights for the truth. So I'm honored each and every day, and I have a new perspective on freedom. I think sometimes we can overlook about just the simplest freedoms that we have. I live out in I have property out in the country, and I just enjoy taking a truck ride out there, enjoying how beautiful the scenes are. Because for years of my life, all I stared at was cinder blocks. So I have a whole nother perspective of not just trying to be in a hurry too much. John 16:33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And this is the man moment I want to leave you guys with. 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things and I put it behind me. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, gentlemen, we have table discussions. You did a fantastic job, brother. You really did. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything you went through, but I'm proud of you. Enjoy your table discussion, gentlemen.